Welcome everyone to this week's MMA Rating Podcast with Roy Billington and Raphael Garcia. You can follow the show on Twitter. It's at MMARatingsNet. At MMARatingsNet. Follow me on Twitter at Roy Billington and Raphael Garcia at Raphael Garcia Sports. Tonight we're going to pretty much discuss what went down at the two UFC shows and pick out what impressed us about the card in total.
Did you get dropped, Roy? I can't hear you.
Sorry, I think I must have just cut out.
Yeah, there you go.
First off, we'll discuss the fight night in Macau in China. What did you think of that card, Raph?
I didn't catch too much of it, to be honest with you. I only saw the main event where Mike put the beating on Kung Lee. Did you see his face after the fight?
Yeah, man, that was absolutely crazy. It looked like Rocky.
Yeah, it was definitely disgusting. I didn't see if I wasn't really able to catch the post fight, but did Kung Lee retire?
I didn't see it, but I'm guessing he's going to have to, man. He's at that age now where he's past his physical prime, he's past his mental prime. He just didn't look there. He showed shades of his former glory. You know, he threw a few good kicks, but Michael Bisping was on another level. It was one of the best Bisping performances in a long time. Now, if that was just because of the competition he was facing, or perhaps he's recovered from the partially torn retina that he had suffered prior to the Tim Kennedy fight, but Bisping looked truly revitalized in that match.
I definitely think it was because of who he was facing. Bisping hasn't looked good in his last couple of bouts. The last time I thought he would look really good was against Chael, and that was, 2 years ago? So, yeah, I think it was more a story on his competition rather than him looking that great because, Kung was 42 years old, so I'm guessing, he called him at the right time because Bisping did look really good, but I think it was more dealing with the fact that he was fighting a 42-year-old man rather than him being turned around from his eye injury.
Yeah, no, that's definitely true. The co-main event we had a matchup that on paper looked like it was going to go the distance, maybe perhaps, or go later on into the fight, but it ended in a minute. It was Tyron Woodley v. Don Hyun Kim. How did you think of that fight? What did you see?
I wasn't surprised at all. I mean, I think when you and I talked about it last week, I had said I wanted Kim to win, but I didn't see how he had any way to beat Tyron at all. And it was just a matter of time before someone caught him doing all those spinning elbows. I mean, it was just a matter of time. He threw like 3 against John Hathaway, and he threw 2 in a row last night before getting caught and getting knocked out. So I'm not too surprised with what I saw. I wanted him to win. I wanted him to pull out, kind of find a way to pull out a win as a welterweight where he's kind of overlooked. But I'm not surprised that he got put to sleep in any way, shape, or form.
After that sort of performance, does that do much for Tyron Woodley? Does it improve him in the rankings much? Because a lot of people expect him to beat Kim. Do you think that's the fight he needed, the performance he needed to go with it?
That's a good question. I think it won't move him up too far right now because, like you said, he was expected to win. And again, like I said, I feel like Kim was really overlooked in that weight class. So it won't do a lot for him, in his quest to get a title shot. Definitely this year, maybe, if he puts on another 2 or 3 good wins next year, he could probably line himself up around this time in 2015. But I don't think it does a whole lot for him and his argument, that he should be the next in line to face Hendricks or Robbie Lawler.
Yeah, I agree. The fight that I'm really interested in seeing again is Woodley v Carlos Condit when Carlos Condit gets back to full fitness. I'd love to see that take place over 5 rounds because, Woodley was winning that fight. Regardless of Condit getting injured or not, Woodley was ahead on the points, and I'd love to see how that fight would play out over 5 rounds.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you on that. Tyron was winning before Condit's knee blew out. When is Condit supposed to be back?
In January, I think he's aiming to begin full training, and then he's going to look toward the spring return, which should be interesting.
And has he been booked in any fights yet?
No, he's still getting back to full health.
Okay, well, yeah, that's definitely something to look forward to because those knee injuries are definitely pretty bad. We've seen them hamper a lot of people. I want to say the only guy who's really ever come back from it and looked good was GSP. Outside of that, no one's ever really had to come back from that type of injury yet.
It's very true. And even GSP has looked like a shade of his former glory. He looked good. He looked better than the rest of the competition, but he still wasn't as agile and mobile. Especially for a guy like Carlos Condit, his game really is movement, footwork, and various strikes. With a serious knee injury like that, his lateral movement is likely to not be the sharpest anymore. It's going to be interesting to see if he can implement his usual tactics with recovered from that injury.
Did anyone else catch your attention from the first card on Friday? Like, did anyone else stand out for you?
Well, no fighter particularly stood out for me, but one thing did stand out for me was the UFC changing the judges early on in the night. Because obviously in Macau there's no commission, but Dana White physically intervened and took one of the judges out and told him not to judge the fights anymore, which is an interesting thing. Is it right for the promotion to stop judges judging mid-event? Is that somewhere where they should be allowed to do? What do you think?
I mean, well, first off, to answer the first part of your question is if it's something that they should be doing. The answer is definitely yes, because they haven't released what judge was removed, but I want to say it was Howard Hughes, is the only one that was assigned to the first two fights of the night, and for those decisions to be as controversial as they were, I think it's a good move for them to make a stand, where they stand with when it comes to these judges who aren't doing their jobs correctly. It puts them in a bad position because it may seem like they're trying to get judges in there that will give them decisions that they want. I can see how that story can be twisted in that direction, but I'm not upset with them for pulling out somebody who's not doing their job. I mean, if you think about it, anyone else in any other industry, if you don't do your job right, you're going to get fired. So for the UFC to do their thing on Friday and pull him out of his seat, I have no problems with that.
For me, it was a good call on the night. The judging wasn't great, but it kind of sets a scary precedent. In the future, could UFC do that? When the cards, fights aren't going the way they want them. When judges are making decisions that doesn't benefit the company moving forward. The controversial decisions that do happen. Will they look to remove the judges again? Probably not, but it sets an easy precedent for that sort of thing to happen.
I mean, the issue is if the guy wasn't doing his job right, he shouldn't have been doing the job in the first place, in my opinion.
It shouldn't be down to the UFC to make sure that someone's doing their job right, judging. It should be an outside body making sure that their guys are competent.
I don't know if I agree with you there, man, because in that situation, they are the outside body. It's unfortunate, but China doesn't have anyone to stand in place at the point in time. So in that situation where they're in a foreign country, they are their own governing body. So they did what was in their actual power at the time.
That's a good point.
Good. So what did you think of Royston Lee and the way he performed on Friday?
Royston Lee, yeah, as we spoke about this last week in a bit of detail, he's an interesting one. They're obviously building him up to be the big guy, but obviously his skill level is sort of capped. He did what he had to do. I wouldn't say impressive. Far from impressive. When you consider the competition that he was against, you'd expect a lot better. But he did what he could with what was in front of him.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I was interested in seeing what he did coming into the fight, but he did exactly what I thought. I'm surprised he got that split decision like that because I thought it was a little bit closer. But he got another win. He's someone that they're definitely trying to back over in China at this point in time. So we'll see what's next to him. Did you like what you saw from Colby Covington? I know you had pointed him out last week as well.
Yeah, I was really impressed with a lot of performances from the guys on the undercard actually. Alberto Mina looked good. Sasaki looked very good. Roland Delorme was a tough guy, and getting a finish like that was pretty impressive. All in all, there was a lot of good performances on the undercard. A lot of guys that impressed, considering a competition. But yeah, I was impressed with the undercard and some performances on it.
So do you think there's anything like worth value-wise that you saw on the undercard? What's next for some of these guys? Are they going to continue staying on some of these foreign events, or are any of them going to make any moves in North America?
I think the UFC needs to keep these guys where they are right now. I don't think skills-wise they're quite at the level yet to jump over and take a big fight in America, because it's a different level going to America. The guys fighting in the UFC on the big shows in America are not like the guys fighting on these lower level shows, the Fight Pass shows in Asia. I think a gradual build up needs to happen. And even maybe these guys who win a couple of fights should perhaps go to one of the European UFC shows where the standards are a bit higher again, and just test the waters before making the jump to the bigger UFC cards.
Yeah, that's definitely true because a lot of times you see these guys are coming over and they're losing. It's unfortunate, but like I think of like who are some other names that have come over and like have not done as well. Probably like the biggest name that comes to mind for me right now is Shinya Aoki when he fought back in Strikeforce. You know, he didn't do well when he fought Gilbert Melendez, and that was what 3-4 years ago, maybe even a little bit longer than that. And since then, you know, Chinese fighters and Asian fighters in general haven't been able to acclimate themselves to fighting in the cage or fighting under the UFC fight to begin right now.
Yeah, it's even to be seen with the likes of Takanori Gomi, who never relived his pride form. Sexyama, he wasn't as good as he was when he was fighting in Japan.
Isn't he fighting again too coming up? Like, didn't they keep him around?
Sorry?
Like, isn't I think Sexyama got it. He has another fight coming up in the Octagon, doesn't he? Like, didn't he take another fight like coming next month or something like that?
Yes, he's fighting Amir Sadala in Japan.
Yeah, see, so I mean,
In Japan. People often remark about how it affects fighters from America traveling to fight in Asia, but you know it's an equal fact that when the Asian guys come over to the US, they find it very hard to acclimatize.
yeah, that's definitely true. And what's unfortunate for some of these guys is that they're being kept around because they know that they have like when they do get the right type of matchup for them, that the UFC has a chance to make money off of them. So like they are getting additional chances that you may not see for other guys from different countries.
Yeah, since the UFC started, you know, there's been very few Asian-based fighters who have performed well at the highest level. And I think skills might not be the case because there has been a number of good Asian fighters. Like, you know, Shinya Aoki has teared people apart for years, and he just never could put it together once he made the travel across to America. So I think it's interesting that it just seems to take a lot longer for fighters to acclimatize to the different standard of living over in America and fighting in America.
I can agree with you on that, Roy. So now like that was kind of like the lesser of the two cards from this past weekend. So let's move on to UFC Fight Night Henderson versus Dos Anjos. And you know what the first thing I'm going to say is, right?
I know what the first thing you're going to say is.
Exactly. So since I won the bet, did you see what I sent you? Like, I think I sent you a tweet on Wednesday saying what I wanted when I won.
Yeah, I'm up for it, man. How about tomorrow I do it?
All right, bet. You have to, and you can't challenge me in response either. So don't try to be funny. You have to do it. You have to challenge someone else too. I'm glad I thought this out. 'Cause I almost set myself up for the loss. But yeah, definitely. I was surprised at the. Do you think it was a bad stoppage?
Yeah, I thought it was an awful stoppage. You know, remember back in WC when Anthony Pettis Showtime kicked Ben Henderson. Ben Henderson was as hurt then as he was last night. Benson Henderson is one of the most durable guys that there is. He should always be given a chance to rebound back. Straight after knockout, I know he took maybe one shot after he dropped, and then he just recovered, man. He was back in it. He was stood up and he was fine. Literally 30 seconds after, and it wasn't just like flash KO. To me, he seemed like he was in it the whole time. What do you think?
Yeah, I definitely thought it was a quick stoppage. And it's kind of I don't want to put it this way, but it's kind of ironic that he would take this loss, you know, in a kind of controversial way. When you look at how many, like he's had at least almost 5 controversial wins in his career recently. So it's almost sad. I don't want to say karma, but it's unfortunate that he had to lose in this way. You know, if Henderson was going to lose, you know, you would rather see somebody actually defeat him and not defeat him in a way where someone can bring up questions about it. But that's exactly what happened last night. And now you have that whole, I guess, air of circumstance around RDA and what he's been able to do recently too.
Yeah, I think the lightweight division is in a very bad spot. A lot of guys around there now, coming off losses. A lot of the top contenders are coming off losses. You know, we have Gilbert Melendez going to be fighting Anthony Pettis. Outside of that, we've got Nurmagomedov, who's injured. Got Donald Cerrone, who's facing Eddie Alvarez, and that fight will probably produce the next number one contender. But other than that, there's not a lot in the division that is going to be around. You know, there's not a lot of guys out there that are ready for a title shot. I think Dos Anjos isn't near enough to a title shot, considering he was dominated by Nurmagomedov in his last fight. So it's kind of troublesome and worrisome. I'm looking forward to the lightweight division and what's going to happen there next.
Yeah, I know. Nurmagomedov's out until like what, February of next year or something like that. So I know he's gone for a while. What do you think about Dos Anjos facing the winner of Alvarez and Cerrone maybe like in December to see who's the next man to face Anthony Pettis or Gilbert Melendez, because they fight in January, I believe. So that'll kind of put them on the right schedule to set up that fight.
Yeah, Dos Anjos recently enough bet Donald Cerrone. And that fight was pretty much one-sided. So I don't know if the UFC would make that matchup if Donald Cerrone was successful. I think, to be honest with you, if Eddie Alvarez or Donald Cerrone wins, I have no problem with either of those two guys getting a title shot. I feel both of them deserve it for their body of work thus far. I think Donald Cerrone has proven time and time again to be a company man. He's an exciting fighter, and a fight for him with the title would be interesting. It'd be more so interesting if his prospective opponent was Gilbert Melendez, though, in my opinion, considering how Anthony Pettis dominated him.
Yeah, I want to say he stopped everybody this year so far. This will be his fourth fight of the year, and you know he's one that will step out there and do whatever they ask him to do. So I would like to see him get rewarded in the same way too. I wouldn't be surprised if Eddie has a clause in his contract where he's one fight away from a title shot. So I wouldn't be mad at either one of those guys getting a shot off of their win, off of their fight next month. What do you think is next for Henderson though? How far down does he go with this loss? Is he still, I still think he's one of the best three lightweights in the sport easily. So where do you think he goes from here? Like, is he not that far down the peg?
He'll probably most likely fight the loser of the Cerrone fight, the Cerrone Eddie Alvarez fight, I reckon. But an interesting one for Dos Anjos, I think, is the Bobby Green fight. That fight could be very interesting.
What did they do with Bobby Green since they pulled him off of that Cerrone card?
Off the top of my head, I'm not too sure. I know there was talks of him fighting Masvidal, who was his original opponent, but I haven't checked since. Let's give it a quick look and see. But Bobby Green, he's definitely improved so much lately. He's looked so good. I would have nothing against him getting a good shot. No, he's not on the card anymore, from what I can see. Jorge Masvidal's fighting James Krause now. There's no sign of Bobby Green. So he's most likely to get Dos Anjos next, in my opinion.
Yeah, I'm definitely looking forward to seeing what's next for him too. He's someone that's kind of crept up out of nowhere to be, a top 10 lightweight, but he still has a lot of work to do before he really gets any attention in that weight class. What did you think of the rest of the card? Were you surprised with the way Jordan Mean put away Mike Pyle?
No. I thought Mike Pyle might have the advantage just because of what happened in the day before the fight with Mean's father. I thought the mental edge might go to the wily veteran, but it wasn't to be. Jordan Mean looked great, but seeing with Mike Pyle, he beats everybody except for the young up-and-comers, and then he just folds. It's quite bizarre to watch. He doesn't look the same sort of fighter against the younger guys. It's really weird. Jordan Mean was very impressed in what he did, and I think he's got a bright future ahead of him.
Yeah, I can definitely agree with you there. I think he's someone that looks good. I'm wondering what's next for him, because he even looked good when he fought against Matt Brown before Brown came from behind to stop him. So I'm hoping that he kind of grows into that into those expectations that people really have of him coming out of Canada, where they're still looking for a star to replace GSP. What about the Palace latest Francis Carmon fight? That fight went nothing like I saw it going.
Yeah, that was crazy, man. Carmon has proven to be durable. He's proven to beat a lot of guys. His style has never been the most exciting. He's shown a willingness to trade with guys. I expect him to probably grind out Talis Ladies. But Talis Ladies showed he has power in his hands, man. It was a crazy knockout. Talis looks amazing since coming back to the UFC. When you consider, actually, he's a guy who's had two very bad knee injuries, and he's bounced back, and he's looked as good as ever now.
Yeah, that's
Uh,
very true.
that's how he's done the UFC, and I really want to see him get a big name fight.
What do you think this guy's gonna do? Like, is he gonna fight his way back to another middleweight title shot? Like, who would have? There's comeback stories in the sport that we don't really talk about too often. He definitely is the front runner for, like, I guess, the comeback story of this year or of the last couple of years.
Yeah, definitely. I know there's been a lot of talk about Luke Rockhold v Michael Bisping, but I see Luke Rockhold is probably going to get the Lyoto Machida fight. If
Yeah.
that happens, I expect Bisping perhaps to get the fight against Talis Ladies because it makes sense in a lot of ways. Because for Talis Ladies, it's a big win if he beats Bisping, and for Bisping, it's an opponent to keep him busy. I think that fight could well happen coming up later toward the end of the year, and perhaps maybe in the UFC show in the UK in next year, the beginning of next year, could happen also.
Do you think Tyler can fight his way back to back to a title shot?
Um, Probably not, man. It just depends on the state of the division right now. Luke Rockhold, Loudon Machida, Vitor Belfort, Jacare, Tim Kennedy are all guys that are just around the precipice of a title shot right now. I really don't see him working his way back to a title shot. Maybe perhaps like a number one contenders fight, but he's not going to be beating guys like Jacare, man. Luke Rockhold would annihilate him. Machida, Tim Kennedy, Musasi, they're all terrible matchups for him. But for what he's done for the comeback has been very, very impressive to me.
Yeah, I can definitely agree with you on that. So looking at the rest of the card, the late card from last night, what else caught your eye? I know for myself, the biggest thing was seeing Ben Saunders come back, and he hit the first omoplata finish in UFC history. I wasn't surprised that he got the win. I was just surprised that it went down that way, and it was impressive. Like the shoulder was in a very bad position. I thought he was going to break it for a second. I know he mentioned in a post-fight interview that he was well prepared to break that guy's shoulder. So I was just shocked that he got the win and he got it that way.
Yeah, it was very shocking and surprising considering his opponent is actually a pretty good grappler in his own right. But Ben Saunders, man, he's such an exciting guy to watch. I've always loved watching him. He was very exciting in his stint in Bellator. They were crazy to let him go. And his guard is something else. He's a very high-level guy. He's no more so for his Muay Thai than he is his Jiu-Jitsu, but he's obviously been training extensively with Eddie Bravo, which is gonna benefit his guard in some way. But for me, he's matured a lot since his time in the UFC. His first stint in the UFC needs to improve. He's a much more well-rounded fighter. Now, with that being said, I don't see him making it into the top 10 of the UFC, but I see some interesting fights from him. He's always going to be an exciting fighter to watch.
Yeah, I definitely loved watching him when he was with fighting guys like Askren and all those over in the other organizations. But I agree. I don't think he's going to make it like in the top 10. But he can be a bad matchup for a lot of guys. He can definitely be someone that's used to test newcomers into 170. What do you think about him fighting Matt Brown?
That'd be very exciting. I was just thinking as you were saying that fight could be potentially very good. A fight with Carlos Condit would be amazing. Style-wise, he just brings so much to the plate. Him v Nick Diaz, man. Can you imagine that?
Yeah,
Just the way he lands some trades with guys, it's amazing.
like if I had any say, I would immediately book him and Matt Brown as like a main event, like a box card, and just let them go at it for like as long as they wanted to.
Yeah, man, I'd want 10 rounds of that.
For sure. Did anyone else kind of stand out for you last night?
Uh, just thinking now, there was a few good fights, there was a few good performances. For me, Max Holloway looked good once more. Max Holloway has improved, and we've been talking about this for a while. Maybe he's so green still in his career that his best performances are ahead of him. He's took a few hard fights and lost badly, but he's only young. I think he's shown a lot of potential. I think he's going to move forward and make a real name for himself.
What did you think of the guy who actually stood out for me was Joby Sanchez. Even though he lost in the opening fight, I liked what I saw from him against Wilson Hayes. And the same thing goes for Hayes as well. He had to dig deep to get that win because he got dropped twice in the second. But the only thing about Joby that kind of caught my attention was the fact that when he was taken down, he kept giving up his back, and you can't do that. Not at this level. Guys are going to submit you more and more as he continues to do that. If that was like a Formiga or someone like that he was fighting, he would have definitely been tapped out quickly the first time he did it. So he's someone that has a lot of room to grow. I think he took this fight on 19 days notice. So it'll be interesting to see what he does next with a full camp under him.
Yeah, and Wilson Reyes is a very exciting fighter. He's proven himself to be a top guy. Obviously, he had a great stint with Bellator. He fought some good fights in Cage Warriors. He submitted Owen Roddy. He choked him out, and that was a great fight back in Cage Warriors a few years ago. And I think he's another one that's just kind of on the outside looking in. He could have a few big fights coming up for him this year. But as you said, Joby Sanchez looked pretty good on the notice that he took the fight. And it kind of makes me think, is it worth these guys taking these fights on short notice? I know he looked good, but imagine that guy coming into a debut with a full camp.
Yeah, I definitely would like to see that happen. I think he's a lot better than he looked last night. And last night, he even looked good. He like I said, he dropped Hayes twice during the fight. He did it very well too. Like the left hook and then the head kick that he landed was clean, and it was right on point. So I'm looking forward to seeing what's next from him. Before we're going to continue on with the rest of the show, and let's look at UFC 177 next. Do you still have time to talk about that?
Yeah, I'll get quickly through UFC 177 and then I'll have to go to work, unfortunately.
No problem, no problem. Let's look at that card real quick and tell me what are your initial thoughts on this weekend's pay-per-view.
I love this card. Ramsey Nijin, he's going to be on the card. He's amazing to watch. I really love watching Ramsey fight. Tony Ferguson v Danny Castillo. That fight's ending with a knockout. That fight's going to be amazing. And then to top it all off, we've got TJ Dillashaw fighting Renan Barão. Renan Barão has proven over the last few years to probably be the greatest bantamweight in UFC history. And to see how TJ Dillashaw absolutely destroyed him in their first fight, it makes me excited to see what performance we see from Barão when he bounces back. It's so interesting to see what will happen. Can TJ do it again? And if TJ does it again, it's going to be so shocking.
What happens if Renan wins? Like, do we get a third fight, or do we look at the first win as more like a hiccup? Because there were rumors coming out that he was sick when they fought at UFC 173. So if Renan gets this win, like, is that more of just like a fluke, or do we see these two guys fight for a third time?
I think if he wins, I think we're going to see a third fight, but I don't want to see an immediate rematch. I'm somewhat against immediate rematches. I like when guys get a chance to take a fight or two in between the end of the trilogy. It builds more anticipation and makes guys want it more. The fans want it more. So that's what I'd like to see. There's a similar thing happened to Vincent Henderson and Frank Yeager. When that immediate rematch happened, not many people were too interested in watching it. A lot of people wanted to see both fighters fight once more, maybe twice more. I think the UFC needs to space out the trilogies, same as Cain Velasquez and Junior Dos Santos. They need more spaced out trilogies.
Yeah, I can agree with you on that. Looking at UFC 177, the thing that kind of has my attention, I want to see how good Henry Cejudo looks against Scott Jorgensen. I think that's a big fight for both guys. Jorgensen, he's been wavering a lot in his last couple of contests. So if he loses, he may find himself out of the organization. And Henry, he has that the wrestling pedigree bringing him into the cage. So he needs this win to kind of prove that he belongs. So I know there were some individuals that claimed that Henry was ducking him, and also I want to see how good he looks for the weight cut as well, because he's had some issues with making weight. Lorenz Larkin and Derek Brunson, I think both of these guys are on short strings as well to get a win, because these are two guys who have looked good, have had flashes of some great performances, but haven't gotten the job done as well. So I'm looking forward to that fight. And, of course, the Shayna Baszler and Beth Correa matchup, too, as well. I'm wondering if Shayna's going to get that win and kind of set the four horsewomen apart, or if Correa's going to if she gets this win here, I think she's next in line for Ronda Rousey.
Yeah, I think Shayna's probably going to get beaten. Shayna's far past her best. I think it's shown. I know she was a great fighter for her time, but unfortunately for her time wasn't when the women's division was in its stage now. It wasn't in the UFC. Her best fights largely went to no audience. So it's sad to see, but I think Beth Correa is going to get the win and probably will get a title shot. To be honest, Cejudo, I'm more interested in seeing if he can make the weight before the fight. I personally don't think he's going to make the weight, and if he does, he's going to look awful. But yeah, it's going to be an interesting fight night, all in all.
Yeah, I can definitely agree with you on that. I may have to give you that bet on Henry because you said you think he might not make the weight. I'm going to go with he might make it this time and then start to miss it later on. But I'll hit you up over the week for that decision.
It sounds good, man. Listen, I better run, but enjoy the rest of your week, and I'm looking forward to the fights.
No problem, man. I'll catch up with you.
Cool. Bye.
See ya. All right, so we're gonna continue going forward from there. You know, we're looking forward to UFC 177, which is this weekend. Another good card is the 1FC 19, which is set for the 29th. That's Friday, and this card it has some interesting value, even though it may not get a lot of attention over here. You know, Shinya Aoki is fighting Kamal Shalarus, which is something I look forward to seeing. Ben Askren is making his attempt to get his second title in his still young MMA career. So if he gets that win, you can expect to hear him talking a lot of junk. And then Roger Huerta, he's coming back to the cage as well after that vicious stoppage that he took a couple years back. So there's some value in this card as well. It'll be a late night for you Friday if you do intend on watching it, but it'll be worth the clicks if you can find a stream of this card online coming Saturday. So to continue on, we're going to talk about some of the news pieces that came across from MMA this past week. The biggest one was probably Eddie Alvarez signing with the UFC. Bellator gave him his unconditional release on Tuesday, and that set up the UFC being able to sign him and put him against Donald Cerrone for UFC 178. You know, if you were following the story, this was kind of announced last week or the week before, I believe, but it wasn't locked down. Where it looks like the UFC was able to get the deal done. They brought him in, and now he's getting probably like I guess not a number one contenders fight, but a fight that can put him in position to challenge for the title. So it's a big fight for him. You know, he has to win this card. It's not the main event of the evening, so it'll be 15 minutes of action. But Donald is a very tough opponent, and I can see this fight going either way. I think it's a good move for both Bellator and for the UFC because the UFC gets the guy that they wanted, and Bellator shows that they were willing to work with fighters. They kind of had a bad reputation when they were under Bjorn Rebney that they weren't willing to let guys go who wanted to kind of advance their career. But this is a good move in good faith for them to kind of, I guess, win back some of the good graces that they had lost with some of the fighters over the last couple of years. So it'll be interesting to see what comes next from this story. We already talked about the UFC removing a judge from an event. I'm looking forward to seeing if it happens again, or what steps can be made to kind of get some of these bad judges out of the sport. I think, as I mentioned to Roy earlier, I don't think that they overstepped their bounds in any way, shape, or form. They just did what they had to do because the first two fights were very close and the decisions were very controversial. It's interesting that they both came from the same judge. That was just a bad position that they could have found themselves in if he would have continued making bad decisions throughout the night. And you know, there's one thing for a decision to be controversial, for it to be close, but there's another for it to be just completely wrong. And I think that's the direction we were headed in last night. Throughout the rest of the world in combat news, we definitely saw Mirko Krokop. He got another win on I believe when was that, last night? Yeah, he got another win last night as well. You know, he's just continued plugging along. You know, he knows his MMA prime is past him, so he just continued doing his thing outside of the UFC, outside of the big shows. So you know, that's great for him. I'm not mad at anyone continuing to fight as long as they're able to perform at a high level, and he's doing this thing right now. There's some good boxing fights that are coming up over the next couple of weeks as well. There's been some good upsets over the last couple of weeks too. So if you're a combat sport fan in general, definitely be sure to stick to ESPN, stick to their the fight cards on Wednesdays and on Fridays. You can catch some of these guys up and coming young. We definitely have the Floyd Mayweather Marcos Maidana fight on the 13th in a couple weeks. So that rematch, I don't see it going any differently than the first one did. I expect Floyd to do his thing up against the ropes and counter punch his way to another win. But you know, he's probably going to do big numbers. I'm probably interested more in like the business side of that event to see how much money Floyd makes. He made $105 million last year, so it'll be interesting to see, like, or I think to this point this year, actually, he's made $105 million. So we're going to see what he does with this card to kind of put himself over the top. I expect him to be on top of that Forbes list of highest earning athletes in 2014 as well, because he's just continuing to do his thing. Let me see what else we have coming up. That's basically it. What's going on? It's funny. We're at a kind of a busy point in time with MMA right now. We have 2 cards last night. We have a pretty big UFC 177 this weekend. Probably one thing I'm definitely looking forward to with this fight is to see how well the pay-per-view numbers are for this card. It hasn't gotten a lot of promotion. I've written a couple pieces about how UFC 178 is overlooking it, and now with Demetrius Johnson being taken off of that card, that kind of devalues it even more, because there's some good matchups, but it doesn't necessarily carry the name value of UFC 178, nor has it gotten the publicity that that event has as well. So I'm looking at it from a business standpoint to see how many buys it does. I'm going to say 300,000 being like a high point for it. That may be like the highest amount of buys that card will get this weekend. If it does that many, I'm definitely going to be surprised. So that'll be something to look forward to. I hope it is at least a good card, that these guys get some good wins and they get some good talking points for them going forward. You can always, and as far as MMA ratings, we're going to be working on our site. We update content every day. There's going to be some new pieces coming out for fights to make for the winners and losers from this past weekend. So keep an eye out for that. I know Roy, myself, Adam Martin, and Michael Ford will all be putting out content. So be sure to follow us at MMA Ratings. You can visit the website, at MMAratings.net. You can catch us on Twitter. I'm rgarcia_sports, and you also have at Roy Billington. And you can follow the site itself at MMA Ratings.net. And you can also follow us on Instagram as well, too, where we put out pretty funny memes and anything MMA related there, too, as well. So, again, I'm Raphael Garcia. Roy Billington was here. He had to step away. So thanks again for following us this week, and have a great day.